So this week in Aristeia 99, we're talking about Bixie. Bixie is the fourth and final character in the Human Fate expansion. We're going to start off with her stats. She has an initiative of 5, movement of 3, energy of 3. First character like this, she also has a health of, you guessed it, 3. She's coming in with a defense of a blue and a yellow. Not what I would necessarily call great, but workable. She has a brawl of a blue and yellow, not great, but workable. And she has disengage of a yellow. A little interesting when you kind of get down to it, but there you go. Her character switch is a shield and a bang. Place yourself adjacent to a blocked or occupied space that is already adjacent to you. This is very possibly one of the most particular switches we've come across to date. So basically, if you are adjacent to a space that is blocked or occupied, so that could be an obstacle, that can be a character, you can place yourself adjacent to them. So when you look at, the 6 sides they have, you're adjacent to one of them. Well, place yourself adjacent. That means the other 5 are available for you to choose from. This is a very interesting switch. It's all about positioning. It doesn't necessarily help her escape, but it could. You never know. It does depend on what the situation is. So one thing we're going to go ahead and say right now about Bixie is that premeditation is your friend. I would consider her to be an advanced character. You want to think about things ahead of time. And honestly, she's the kind of character that you might actually want to spend a little bit of time before the game actually looking at the map, whether you're looking at the default side A, side B, or the Scythe Traders map. The reason why is you want to get a feel for it, for these maps, and you want to have an idea of how quickly can I get around. So her first ability is a 2-point attack called Celestial Wind. It is an orange, a blue, and a yellow with a range 1 to 6 line of sight required. Now with this, she actually has 2 switches. For a success and a bang, you can place yourself adjacent to the target. And that target has to be an enemy, pretty much. But if you get 3 shields, you gain 1 action point. The inclusion of a blue makes this more likely than maybe you would give it credit for, but it's certainly still kind of a difficult role there. And orange isn't going to have a great number of defense blocks, shields on it. Likewise, a yellow will not either. So, and really the blue only has 1 result with 2 shields on it, so it's not a good guarantee. This is something that if you're really hoping for an action point, you probably want to actually add in a blue. Another yellow would work fine in a pinch, but blue is really your preference. So this is one of the big things with her really, is that this is a way to get around, not so much doing damage. And the fact is, you target someone 6 spaces away, you go for the switch of a success and a bang. You can go 1 more beyond that, depending where you place yourself. So you use Celestial Wind, you hit an enemy teammate, an enemy minion, whatever, and you would be able to use this to get around. Next up is going to be Amperes Light. It is an orange, it is a yellow, and if you are successful, you get to impose the marked state on her target. This does have a range 1 to 4 line of sight required. This is something you would do more to, although you could use it for setting up for Celestial Wind, you do need to be thinking a little farther ahead in terms of how you're going to do that. You could, however, also use this to tag a friendly model and make it so that they can be targeted with friendly buffs, such as a heal or a state cleanse, no matter where they are, because line of sight's taken out. This is a very good ability, and it actually plays very nicely with the rest of her teammates, not only from Human Fates, but any team she's on. So this is a good thing to have. It's a very useful ability. Little short range to it, 1 to 4 is not great, but it's not bad either. For 1 point, Domos Gift, range 1 to 3 line of sight required, is the cheaper way for Bixie to move around. Now, this does not require a roll, which is fantastic. However, you're placing yourself adjacent to a blocked space within range. Now, one of the things that can be confusing about this is when you see block spaces together, they sometimes look like they form a unit. You can only target one of those spaces, and you're placing yourself adjacent to that one single space. So you can't start at the end, so the closest point of one group, and go to the farthest end. That's not how it works. This is why you study. You want to be able to kind of at a glance have an idea, have a feel for how you want to move around. Bixie is the rival to Gata. That means, you know what she is? She's actually a scoring character. So the ability to get here, there, and everywhere, you're going to see with both Domos Gift and Celestial Wind. The fact that Amperes Light imposes marked on something is actually more of a counterpoint to Gata's Dazzle. So thematically, she is very much a rival, and she has similar but different movement options than Gata. So whereas Gata is going to try and go and hop over everybody and just sprint, Bixie wants to kind of go from point to point to point, maybe using an enemy as a grappling point using Celestial Wind, but ultimately she is someone you really need to think about how you're going to be using her. And this is the main reason I feel that she is an advanced character. I don't think it's necessarily wise to just pick her up and say, I'm going to play her, and not have thought of these things ahead of time. Finally, we're going to have Yi's Vision, Ignore the Effects of Smoke. Now, we've covered Dawu, we have covered Cosmo, we have actually covered Lei Gong ahead of schedule. Smoke is a very powerful thing in Aristeia in that it blocks line of sight, and that would be very detrimental to her. However, the Team Eugene, as it's been called a few times, does a lot with smoke. It's just part of their theme. It's their thing. It's what they do. So this actually gives her additional protection because she can actually be behind smoke and not have it interfere with her. This helps her with movements. This just does a lot for her if it's required by the team composition. If you do not have Dawu or Cosmo or Lei Gong, or conversely the enemy doesn't have them, then it's a nice thing that won't actually get used. But because invulnerability or immunity to things like that are relatively rare in this game, you know, it's still a very good perk, even if you don't personally end up using it. So, on Bixie's tactics, first off, it's going to be Feng Shui. During the action step of Bixie's activation, place a blocked space token on a free space within range 1 to 5, line of sight required. Remove this tactic from game. This is probably one of the most unique cards in the game because this is the only one that lets you do a permanent change to the gaming arena. While in theory it's there for her to use for movement, if you want, really the options from there are actually quite varied. If you want to, say you're playing Scorched Earth, where scoring zones disappear and your limits become more limited over time, your options are more limited over time, you could use this to block off access to one. You could use this to pen someone in so they have to go the long way around. Really what you want to do here, if you want to make cover for somebody, certainly if Major Luna's out in the open, you pop that down, then all of a sudden she has cover, which would be a black die, which she can then convert to an orange die if she wants, putting cover down for yourself. There's just a good number of interesting options you can use here. Say Gaia is out with all three of her wonderful tentacles out. You put one in the center and basically force your opponent to have to destroy, actually attack them to be able to get through for an area. It helps you with controlling the battlefield. You can only do it once, make it count. But this is actually a very interesting card, and it's one that I feel that if used strategically, maybe more late game than early, unless, say, you're doing the dead center point in a map. Then you could do some really change the flow of things if you do it strategically. Would it get node? I think it depends. Some uses are more obvious than others. And I think with, say you do it earlier on, you could possibly feint like, oh, I'm putting this down for cover, but I actually want it there for later in the game for this reason or that reason. And I think that's kind of interesting simply because you can sort of feint that if you want. If you just throw it out of nowhere, then people go, oh, what's that all about? And you'll make them think. So we'll see. I'll fully admit Bixie is probably the one character in this game that has intimidated me the most, and it's the one I've played probably the least. Primus, on the other hand, loves her to death, and, well, his mind is just much sneakier than mine. After that, we have Curse of Youll, I hope I'm saying that correctly, during the action step of one of your character's activations. So this is a team one. Impose the -2 state on a marked target. This is a great ability not only for Bixie to use, but, oh my gosh, certainly Prism. Goodness gracious, that's sort of horrifying. This is a fantastic card. There's no range on it, so anywhere in the hexadome will work and be valid. So with that in mind, and they got a picture of Gata being tied up. This is a great one to limit mobility of the opposing team, and because it's not an immobilize, I think you get a little more mileage out of it, depending on what you're up to. Certainly putting this on a fast mover, such as Gata or Musashi, wonderful. Obviously, putting this on a slow mover, such as Maximus. Nope, that's fantastic as well. So you're going to get pretty good mileage out of this. You do need to put marked on them. If you can have more than one way to get marked on someone, fantastic. As is, because Bixie has that, it is self-sufficient. So, after that, we have the benediction of, I can't pronounce that. Zurong. During the action step of Bixie's activation, displace yourself. Awesome. Gain 1 action point. Amazing. Primarily because she is such a low energy character. Certainly for her, when she comes in off the bench with a -2 energy on her, she only has 1 energy, and that is fairly horrific. Horrific, I think, is the word I'm looking for here. So getting any way to get another action point with her to help with that is fantastic. Displacement on her is fantastic. This is something you want to... I'm not going to say it's a must-have, but it's something I would strongly consider if you're going to be using her. Just because just being able to displace herself 1 is sometimes all you need to get where you want to go. And certainly with her abilities being what they are, low movement, low energy, then just being able to get the extra action point to try and do Celestial Wind or Domos Gift is going to be very important. This is limited to her. So it doesn't contribute to the team directly and has all to do with how you plan to play. Finally, we have Guided by the Spirits. During Bixie's activation, until the end of the round, your action's range type is now no line of sight required. Now, this is kind of game-changing, but it's only for one round. This is something I would almost immediately say, no, you can't do that. I don't want you to do that. Get rid of that card. But to really, I think, to appreciate what's happening here, we need to go back to her character card. So let's look at Celestial Wind. Going range 1 to 6, no line of sight required, immediately makes her far more potent when you consider that line of sight issues, cover, things like that can come into play, whether it's because of blocked spaces or occupied spaces. If you're trying to get behind an enemy that already has a friendly in front of them, this means it's not a problem anymore. If you are trying to get behind blocked spaces to target an enemy for Celestial Winds, it's not a problem anymore. Thankfully, you don't have to worry about smoke. If you are dazzled, you no longer have this line of sight requirement. Because you're dazzled, well, now Celestial Wind being 1/6 no line of sight required means that being dazzled doesn't mess with you in the same way. This takes Celestial Wind from being an interesting but challenging ability to, oh my gosh, why wouldn't you do this? It becomes quite that much more impressive. And again, we're talking about a scoring character here. You don't necessarily want to be engaging in combat with her, this, that, and the other. But having this as an ability makes her, I think, really does favor Celestial Wind. And it's only one round, so it doesn't break her. If anything, I think it helps compensate for the limits placed on her. If you have a way to fish this back out of your discard pile, you may want to strongly consider doing that. But it's just, wow. Likewise, let's go to Amperes Light. Range 1 to 4, no line of sight required. And you're imposing Marked, which is... It's a little less useful in this situation if you're looking at it simply like, oh, I need to mark someone so I can attack them, or use Celestial Wind on them. It's not more useful in that regard. However, it also means that you can be behind cover or behind friendly allies or whatever and mark someone for a teammate, someone else in your team to actually go after and use. This extends the usability, the utility of this really nice ability. And finally, with Domos Gift, sometimes you're going to put yourself in a position where the angle for a blocked space isn't quite where you want it, and you can't actually get to it. So in this case, 1 to 3, you don't have to worry about the line of sight requirements. You can just go, that one, it's in range, zip, and then you can continue moving on normally. It really makes Domos Gift that much more powerful. And I think that's very useful when you consider the fact that its range is only 1 to 3 in the first place. No, that is fantastic. And this is why Guided by Spirits is, I'm going to say, is probably, I'll be honest, for me it would be a must-have. Almost certainly a must-have. And if you were to say you were using Sterling Forge and you had by inches or you had holographic sights because Major Luna's on your team, then you could take all those benefits and add to the range as well. And that just lumping together is just beautiful and awesome and just anyway. Anyways, that is Bixie. She is, again, I personally feel she is not a beginner-friendly character. I think if you're going to use her, you need to spend some time with her. She has got some very interesting abilities that can make her very powerful, but she's got a lot of drawbacks right off the bat. You need to think about your routes going from block space to block space to block space. You have to be mindful of enemies and their positioning. So for instance, if you are in the position where you get to, if you win the initiative, you might just want the other person to go first, hoping that they're going to go into a place you will find beneficial. She's got abilities that, one ability with Feng Shui to help change the battlefield just once, and that could be a very potent thing, but if you just throw it out there willy-nilly or without thinking how this could affect you, not just this turn, but another turn or two down for the rest of the game, then it's probably not as useful as it could be. I really do think she's a character that rewards skill, forethought, and planning, and which really I think has been the overall theme for Human Fate. They are all rather intentional characters, and whether you're looking at Eclipse giving hit into whoever she ends up adjacent to friendly, when you look at Prism and the fact that if you don't play her right, she's basically a suicide magnet. When you look at Dart and you realize you pretty much have to give up your first turn to really benefit from her later on, or you use Eclipse before her. Really, Human Fate is all about thinking ahead. And I think that's appropriate for the name, but it kind of cements the reason why I feel the expansion as a whole is not a good first or second expansion. I would actually, if I was getting into the game again, having to buy a whole new sets and all that, I would probably put them at fourth. I think I would actually do the Legendary Bahadur first, before them, as my third expansion, and really no sooner than that. You could possibly look at the 2019 expansions before Human Fate. But once you are ready for Human Fate, certainly when us and the rest of the guys here at Shameless Mayhem started exploring those characters, they saw a lot more options than they would have than when we all began. The characters made more sense because they had a better feel of things, how they wanted to play, what their options and possibilities were. Anyway, that's Bixie. Guess what we're starting next time? It is actually going to be the Legendary Bahadurs, the final 2018 expansion of Aristeia. I'm really looking forward to that. There's some fun characters in there, and we'll see you then. Adios.